Hey everyone, I'm sitting here at the airport on my way to another adventure, and it dawned on me that I had some footage of stuff. Something happened, something very bad happened, and I forgot to tell you guys about it. So let's get into it. Well, what made me dawn my memory about it is I meant to do this at the time when it kind of happened, but there was no way that it was going to happen while I was dealing with everything. But today happens to be feeding day. I don't really want to house crickets anymore, so I just get from my local supplier. I get crickets kind of the amount that I'm going to need to deal with. You know, we use other types of things. I got springtails, we get mealworms, superworms, hornworms, whatever the animal may be. But today I'm going out of town right away, so today's the day where I'm going to go through and start getting all the animals ready before I leave. So, you know, we've done some feedings and things like that, and I was working my way up, doing some things with the spiders and different things and stuff, and starting to get stuff ready. Big boy down there, he got a big giant cockroach the other day, so nothing happening with him. Did the isopods, we got them all ready to go before I go. And then we've gone and fed each one of the different larger species of tarantula. And I know I'm kind of, you know, I'm stalling a little bit, but we're going to get to it. But this tank here, badly need of redoing. This is the Parabuthus sazami, the big girl. She's sitting right out front there right now. Hopefully some crickets don't jump out at us, but she's sitting right there. Beautiful girl, having some meal. And then my green bottle blue big female, he's here as well. I'd like to redo that enclosure as well down the road, but it's all going to happen. They're all house feed. This is the one that needs it absolutely the most. The Nandu tripepii, the big giant Brazilian blonde. She's absolutely massive, and she can barely even fit in her enclosure with the amount of the way that that plant is pretty much taken over. So we have to do some changes there. The one here for the Panama blonde, that one's going to need it as well, the Parabuthus pulcher. That one, yeah, she comes out, but you can barely ever see her amongst the tangle of all the different pothos. The Harpactira rarely comes out, but the terrarium is very bland and boring. Let's make it a little bit more exciting. Obviously, the lights are off right now. And then my big, my fire leg, my boamai, she's out there just eating. She just went into her hide there. So the purpose of that, you know, I was showing you guys that is, you know, these are all dangerous animals. They're not dangerous. Most of these are not life-threatening in any way. And then my Balfouri enclosure, we just fed them as well. Not them, it's her. It's just the big female that's in here. But she just shed about a week and a bit ago. And I happened to be in town. I caught the shed, left her for a few days to harden off and stuff. And then I introduced a mature male that had just been sitting in the wings, ready to go. It was really cool to see. And that's what this whole enclosure was built around, was to be able to hold a big communal of the Socotra Island blue baboons. So hopefully that takes, we'll get an egg sac, I don't know, about 6 to 8 weeks, and then we'll see what happens. Yeah, Biggs, that's great. We saw all these animals, we saw these spiders and stuff like that. Yeah, but what happened? Well, one day, as I say, a couple of weeks back, I was doing the exact same thing. I usually sit down here in my chair. I've got just kind of a little Rubbermaid here that you saw the crickets are on, and I bring down tubs 1 or 2 at a time, and I deal with them here. And that's the one that's what reminded me, as I was just about to go and do that one today, and it reminded me of it and stuff like that. So I thought, oh, it's perfect, let's take a peek. So this is the enclosure in question. And I've had this animal for a long time here. It's almost 2 years I've had it, and I've grown it up. It's an animal I've never actually ever seen. They're in my opinion, they're totally boring. But to each his own. But I've dealt with this animal forever. It literally lives underneath that piece of log. Right? So no big deal. I pick up the piece of log, and then I throw the cricket in, just, you know, to do its health check every single time. And I do it all the time. I reach in there, I pick up the log, no big deal. And I've done it 1,000 times. Never been a problem. And what happened this time is I didn't realize it. I actually picked it up with my right hand, the hand that I'm holding the camera with right now. And in the time period it took for me just to touch that piece of bark and turn it over, it was already on my forearm. And instinct naturally just came on. I was like, oh, it's on my forearm. And I guess I must have just shook it a little bit or something, you know, just like a nervous glance. I didn't swipe at it. I didn't try and remove it. I didn't do anything. I just kind of like, oh, it's on my arm. And it stung me. It stung me right on top of my forearm. And let's go and see. See, I was just about to go and reach in there again, but let's get the forceps and do it properly. All right, so like normally I just reach in and I pick this out with my hand, and then there it is there. This is you know, when you talk about scorpions, It's not a big one. It's a pretty small one right now, but it is actually, this is captive raised or captive bred. So this is actually the largest of the Buthids. And this one is actually Parabuthus villosus. This is the orange form. But when you know anything about scorpions is if they have little tiny front claws, like this one does, versus say something like the Asian forest or the emperor scorpions that have those very, very large lobster-like claws. The animals that have the very small claws generally pack a real wallop. And this one's often called the hairy fat tail. It's got that's perfect position right there. You can see it's very, very large, heavy tail. It's very hairy. But these ones often have very, very potent venom. The ones that have the large lobster-like claws, like those two that I just mentioned, they can actually subdue their prey using their claws, so they don't really need very, very potent venom. This species actually comes from South Africa, goes all the way up to Namibia, and it's a very, very toxic species. I actually went and looked it up and stuff like that, a little bit more detail, and it's actually one of the few species, unbeknownst to me, this is something I did not know about at the time, is this is one of the species of scorpion that they say has the potential to spray venom. Oh, wonderful. So it's basically like having a spitting cobra in a bug form in my house. But other than that, it's a pretty easy animal to care for. As I say, I've never seen it eaten. It's grown about, not quite, maybe a third larger than since I got it. Maybe it's doubled size. Maybe my perception's off. So as mentioned, this is a very, very highly toxic species. It has a cocktail of venom that, the reason this species has such strong venom, or a lot of the species of scorpions with the small claws, as I mentioned, is that they live in areas where prey sources are few and far between. So if they do get the chance at a meal, they want to make damn certain that that animal or that prey source is completely immobilized so that they can consume it. Animals with lesser venom, like some of the snakes and stuff like that, will often hit an animal with venom and it'll slow it down and then they can chase it to eat it. But in the case of this animal and the habitats it would have, it needs to have much more potent venom to ensure that it's going to be able to survive. And normally, sometimes these animals, or not necessarily normally, sometimes these animals will give you what's called a dry bite, or a dry sting, because they really do not want to use their venom for such things like this. They need their venom for their survival. But I definitely took the full brunt from this little guy, and I decided to kind of ride it out and see what it was going to be like. Now, having been in this situation before, I definitely would not recommend that to anybody that doesn't have the real vast experience of having dealt with such animals before. Always seek medical attention if you don't know. But this one here, I felt pretty safe in watching myself, watching my heart rates and so forth, and seeing how everything was going and transgressing before I thought I was ever going to be in a situation where I needed medical help. Now, at the sting site, the first thing I did experience was an absolute searing heat, an absolute searing pain, more so than any of the other ones I'd been stung by before. And then intense swelling just in my forearm for about 4 inches on either side of it. I had a big kind of forearm for a bit, and it was bright red. But I took antihistamines, and I used a cold compress. I've often talked about, using different types of stings from certain animals, that high heat can often somewhat denature the venom potency. Well, if something like that was causing the intense heat already, I did not want to subject myself to having more heat. So I used ice to reduce a bit of the swelling, and I used, as I say, antihistamines, and honestly, I didn't have much problem. What the problem came for me was about 3 days later. So about a few days after the thing, the swelling had already started to go down, and I got to make note here. I never told my wife about this, because automatically I would have thought she would have said, you got to go to the hospital right away. But someone like myself, who's been through this sort of stuff before, generally often going to the hospital, especially where I live, where none of these animals were ever found, usually causes a lot more headaches than the actual bite itself or sting itself. So I chose not to go that route. I didn't tell her at all. I told her a couple of days ago when I was told her, I says, well, I should make a video about that, but I don't want the video to come out and then her question what's going on. So I did not tell her. I've since told her, as I said, but basically about 3 days later, the swelling started going down real well. I had no issues whatsoever. I had no tightness in my chest. I have, none of those other things that I've had or experienced with other situations I've had in the past. But about 3 days in, when all the swelling started going down, and I'm almost 3 weeks in, I'll show you a picture of my forearm, I still have this noticeable bump, and it's hard. It's about the size of a Canadian or an American dime under the surface, and it's really hard to the touch. Otherwise, you can still see the actual initial injection spot. But originally, that was about the diameter of maybe a golf ball, and it was raised by maybe half an inch. And then the swelling, as I said, was about 3 inches on either side of the forearm from the initial bite site, sting site. But the scary thing for me, or not necessarily scary, the odd thing for me, and this is a thing that I will never forget, and I really, really did not like it, is it. And I can't really 100% infallibly say that this is from this, but I have no reason for it to be anything else. Is after everything started to go down, for a few days, I had this incredible sense. Every bad thought I'd ever experienced, every bad thing that had happened, anybody that passed away, or any bad memories I had, they were all right at the surface. It was the weirdest experience. It sounds kind of weird, it sounds kind of trippy or something like that, but that really wasn't the case for me at the time. It was just a very, very bad experience, and I really, really didn't like that experience, that portion of it. So hopefully that is, I'm assuming it's due to that. I don't know what else it could be, but I've had no other symptoms whatsoever. And this is a species that is a highly, highly toxic species. It is one of the most common ones in its range for bites. But there's no anti-venom or anything like that for me to deal with. And it does have documented cases where it has taken someone's life. So I'm very, very fortunate in that. And the fact that it has this, potential ability to spray venom, I don't know, maybe this is an animal I think Biggs is going to have to take a little more care with, because I got lots of people here that depend on me. So be safe, be smart, don't be a Biggs, take care of these animals and do it properly. Thanks, guys. Next time. Cheers.